Have you ever stopped to think about the words you use every single day? It turns out they have these secret lives, these hidden histories. And a lot of them, well, they weren't exactly planned. Many were born from pure mistakes, happy accidents, and sometimes total invention. So let's dive in and uncover some of these amazing stories. Okay, to get a little perspective, let's jump in a time machine back to 1755. This is when the great Dr. Johnson published his incredible Dictionary of the English Language. Now, this was the most complete list of words at the time, and it had about 48,000 of them. Seems like a lot, right?
Well, it was a ton for the 18th century. But if you fast forward to today, the Oxford English Dictionary lists over 400,000 words. That is a huge jump, an explosion of language in just a couple of centuries.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. Where on earth did all of these new words come from? You might think there's a neat, tidy answer, but the truth is way more surprising and honestly a lot more fun and chaotic than that. So, first up, let's look at the words that were basically just happy accidents. You see, language isn't always logical. Sometimes it just sort of trips over itself, and in the process, a brand new word gets created out of a simple misunderstanding. Let's take the phrase an nickname. This is a perfect example of what linguists call meta-analysis, which is really just a fancy way of saying our brains get confused about where one word ends and the next one starts. See, a long time ago, ick was an old word that just meant also. So an ick name was literally an also name, another name for someone. But you know how things get misheard. Over time, as people said an ick name, their brains just fudged it. The N sound from an just sort of migrated over and stuck itself to the beginning of ick name, and boom, just like that, from a simple slip of the ear, we get a totally new word, a nickname. What a great little mistake. And this happens in other ways too, with something called back formation. For centuries, the only word was groveling, which was an adverb that meant on the ground. You'd say someone lay groveling, but people heard that ing ending and just assumed it must be a verb. So what did they do? They worked backwards and just invented the verb to grovel. We did the exact same thing with editor. The verb to edit didn't exist until we made it up from the noun. And here's a classic example of how words just get completely mangled over time. Goodbye. We say it every day, but it isn't an original word at all. It's just what's left over from the old blessing, God be with ye, after centuries of being said faster and faster and getting slurred together. Okay, but it's not all just accidents and mistakes. We are also incredibly clever and deliberate word makers. So now let's look at how we build brand new words from scratch, usually because we need a way to talk about new ideas or new things in the world. All right, you've got two things here, smoke and fog. They're different, and they each have their own word. But what happens when you get that nasty mix of both? You're going to need a new word for that, right? This leads to what we call a portmanteau. And there you have it. You take the smog from smoke, the og from fog, you slam them together, and you get smog, a new word that perfectly captures the meaning of both. We do this all the time. Think about tragicomedy, which is just a mashup of tragedy and comedy. Now, let's talk about one of the oldest, most primal ways of making words, onomatopoeia. This is where the word literally sounds like the thing it's describing, like a door slamming, or a bee flying past your ear, or a snake in the grass. Bang, buzz, hiss, see? The word is the sound. These words don't need some complicated origin story. You can see their meaning right away. We also love to build with smaller parts, kind of like linguistic Legos. We take a main word and we stick little bits on the beginning, those are prefixes, or on the end, suffixes, and that changes the meaning. Pre means before, so you get premature. Less means without, so you get careless. It's an incredible system that lets us build a nearly endless supply of new words. And think about what happens when a huge new invention comes along. Suddenly, we need a whole bunch of new words. The idea of flight started out as just a flying machine, but once it became real, it needed a real name, aeroplane. And the person flying it, well, they needed a name too, an aviator. And from there, a whole family of words just blossomed. Aircraft, airport, airline. One invention creates an entire new vocabulary. And finally, let's be honest. Language is all about being efficient and maybe a little lazy. We're always looking for shortcuts. And if another language has a word that just works perfectly for something, we're not shy about, well, just taking it. I mean, at our core, we're all pretty lazy speakers, aren't we? Why on earth would you say zoological garden when you can just say zoo? Or omnibus when bus gets the job done? We chop down long words to make them easier to say, and pretty soon, the short version just becomes the new normal. Get this. The word mob is actually just a clipped version of an old Latin phrase, mobile vulgus, which meant the fickle crowd. And sometimes we get new words from the names of people and places. You know the teddy bear? It was literally named after U.S. President Theodore Teddy Roosevelt. The fabric calico gets its name from Calicut, a city in India where it was first traded. In a way, these words become tiny little monuments to a person, a place, or a moment in history. And this right here is probably the biggest secret to English's enormous vocabulary. It's a linguistic sponge. If we need a good word for a cozy place to drink coffee, we'll just borrow café from French. If we need a word for a big circular arena for shows, hey, circus from Greek sounds pretty good. English borrows from everywhere, all the time, and that's one of its biggest superpowers. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway here? It's that language isn't some dusty old rule book that's set in stone. No, it's a living, breathing thing that is constantly changing and evolving right before our eyes. We've seen how new words pop up all the time, sometimes through those happy accidents, sometimes by deliberately building them, other times by borrowing from our neighbors, or just by chopping down longer words to save a little time. It really is a beautifully messy and creative process. And the most important thing to remember is that this process is happening right now. It never, ever stops. Just think about more modern words like Cold War. That phrase didn't even exist before 1939. Or think about how we stick the prefix mini onto everything now, from a minibus to a minicar. Language is changing as we speak. Which really leaves us with one last question to chew on. If words for things like aeroplanes and teddy bears were all invented in the last century or so, what words are being born right now to describe our world? What's going to be the smog or the nickname of the 21st century? The evolution is happening all around us. All you have to do is listen.